what are the pros versus what are the cons of being able to buy inside a self-managed super fund? Well, the first one is you can obviously use borrowed funds, and that can help with accelerating the returns that you're getting through the fund over time. It allows for a portion of diversification. So in most cases, any type of super fund will have a portion of cash, shares, bonds, managed funds as their primary investment vehicles. So this now introduces the ability to have direct residential property. The other thing that I did mention before about the tax treatments, you cannot guarantee that the governments won't continue to keep tweaking the tax legislation when it comes to super. But right now, if you're thinking about entry level here, the attractions here are tax rate on income, and that obviously includes rent.
A few cons to think about is your negative gearing benefits are limited, because the upside of that 15% tax rate is great when you move into income in there. But clearly the negative gearing phase is you're not getting the same benefits as you would if you're paying tax at a 40+% tax rate. So there's that. You've clearly got limited liquidity when you've got property versus other more liquid assets like shares. You can't equity release. If you want to renovate the property, you've got to have cash. You can't borrow for those sorts of things. Interest rates are higher. So basically you're locked into a super environment and all those associated rules. So therefore there's a bit of concentration risk.
As the trustee of the fund, you're in total control. Total responsibility is on your shoulders. Now, you can outsource some of the administrative work, but ultimately the fund and the decisions that are made in the fund are the responsibility of you as the trustee. And there are serious consequences and serious financial penalties if you are non-compliant inside your self-managed super fund. You need to understand that there is a very heavy cost burden in terms of running your own fund, including, obviously all of the trusts and companies that you may be setting up, the holding trusts, etc., and then the annual tax auditing that goes on with that. I should say for running a standalone individual property, this is very much more in terms of the administrative duties that are associated with that. And you've got to have a good accountant, you've got to have a good financial planner, and you've got to be working in concert to basically get the best result for yourself.
What we've observed is it can be a spruiker's paradise as well, because people use that as a way to get you to buy the wrong assets. The spruikers often have the right information from a strategic outlook, but it's when they execute on the asset that it's let down. So that's no different when you come into the super environment as well. If I put my buyer's agent hat on here, the name on the contract is very important, and quite often in a lot of cases is state specific. So if you've gone through to set up the self-managed super fund, you've gone through and you've created the bare trust, you've gone and got that limited recourse borrowing arrangement in place, and everything's ready to go, you will want to stay very close to your advisor and ask them specifically what needs to be included on the contract. And it doesn't necessarily cross borders as well, because there's different regimes. Because if you get that wrong and then you go to the bank and you've got borrowing involved, in some cases you've got to go back and get the contract redone, which means voiding the one that you've got, updating with the new one, which if you're in a fast-paced market, that can be a challenge. And in some cases, in some states, that may trigger additional stamp duty as well.
Just spark one final tip for me, Bryce. And well, what a lot of people don't also realise, in the establishment of the self-managed super fund, you've got to have an outlined and documented investment strategy in terms of what the fund is going to do. So if you've got no reference to direct property or residential property, then you're in breach straight away. If you then go off and think, I'm going to go and buy an investment property, but it's not documented in terms of the investment strategy as set up by the initial setup of the fund, you can't actually do it. I'm intentionally making you scared about this potential opportunity because you need to be advanced. You need to have, that financial literacy and competency that we were talking about before you entertain something like this.
There is a hell of a lot that you need to think about when considering whether or not you would put property in a super fund. At headline level, there's a lot of amazing benefits from doing that, but it really always comes down to the same thing, because when you're buying it in your own name and when you're buying it in a super fund, it is the same game, just different rules. And if you've got to understand the nuance of those different rules and how they apply to you and what you're trying to achieve in terms of the cash flow requirements that you're trying to get in retirement that make all the difference here. Same game, different rules, and those different rules is the reason why you need to get an advisor to help you with this.